And then we can get started. Let me just. Okay. Okay, cool. So again, thank you all for joining me today. I know the weather's really nice, so we'll kind of chat a little bit, and then maybe we all can get back outside and enjoy some nice weather. My name is Courtney. We're going to be talking a little bit about fueling for performance today. So just to kind of go over a little bit of what we'll be covering, I'll give you a little bit of an introduction on myself. I'll cover the importance of proper fueling. We'll talk about some of the risks associated with underfueling. So what happens when we're not eating enough. Um, I'll go over pre, intra, and post fueling basics. We'll take a look at hydration. I'll also have some sample recipes for some fueling basics. And then we'll go over how to build performance plates, and I'll talk a little bit about supplements as well. So just to give a brief introduction to myself, I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago and Elgin, and then moved to Milwaukee, Wisconsin to get my bachelor's in nutrition science from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. I then came back to Chicago for my master's at the University of Illinois at Chicago. While I was there, I completed an internship and volunteered at Northwestern University. So worked with the athletes there. There's a picture of me doing some sweat testing. So looking at athletes' sweat to see how much salt they're losing, and then providing hydration recommendations based on that, which is kind of gross, but kind of fun also. And then last year, at the beginning of the year, I moved to Las Vegas to do a 3-month internship with the UFC Performance Institute. So learned a lot about combat sports nutrition. And then I came back to Chicago and started my own private practice. So right now I'm doing nutrition coaching. I am on track to become a registered dietitian as well. So just studying for that exam. So that's kind of my next step. And then, yeah, but I love working with athletes. This population is really fascinating to me. And it's just interesting to see the differences in fueling between general population and someone in a hospital versus athletes, and looking at how we can really use nutrition to optimize performance while still, enjoying our lives and all that kind of stuff. So enough about me. We'll get into the nitty gritty of things today. So fueling for performance. Why is proper fueling important? So obviously, proper fueling can help to reduce injury, also help with managing inflammation, increasing available energy to do the work that is required of us for our sport, in this case, softball, and also optimizing our overall performance. So these are just a few of the overarching reasons why proper fueling is so important, and how it can really play a role in one's performance. So looking at some of the risks of underfueling, when athletes are not fueling their bodies properly, they typically are at risk of experiencing several negative outcomes, unfortunately. So underfueling can firstly lead to decreased performance during training sessions or games. Um, Without any energy from food, athletes may feel fatigued or have trouble focusing. Reaction times can be decreased, and also just lacking the general like necessary strength and endurance to perform at their best. Um, Additionally, inadequate fueling can result in slower recovery times after intense training. So proper nutrition is really essential for repairing muscles, replenishing glycogen stores, and also supporting overall recovery. Without, sufficient nutrients, the body may take longer to recover from workouts, which can increase the risk of overtraining and burnout. And lastly, underfueling puts athletes at a higher risk of injury. So a lot of times, like I've seen when the body is not properly nourished, individuals are more prone to muscle strains, stress fractures, or other types of soft tissue injuries. Of course, there's other things that can contribute to these, but underfueling can definitely be a contributing factor there. So nutrients like protein, carbohydrates, healthy fats, vitamins, and minerals all play crucial roles in supporting the body's structure, function, and repair processes as well. So it's really vital for athletes to, prioritize proper nutrition and adequate fueling to optimize their performance, recovery, and overall well-being. Um, and by doing so, they can improve their athletic abilities, reduce the risk of injury, and support, long-term success in their sport. So, kind of taking a look at what proper fueling looks like. So we talk about pre-workout fueling. Ideally, we want to make that pre-workout snack, if we're just focusing in on that one part of our day before training, aiming to get around 40 to 60 grams of carbs between like 30 to 60 minutes before training to really top off those energy stores. So the reason that carbohydrates are so important is because they are our body's main source of fuel. So when we eat carbs, whether it's in the form of fruit or bread or pasta or rice, any grains, anything like that, those carbs are then broken down in our body and stored in our muscle and in our liver as what's called glycogen. And when we are training, we're pulling from those energy stores, those glycogen stores, to give our bodies energy to do the work that we need to. So that's why fueling with carbohydrates is so important, because yes, we can get energy. There are, if we want to get sciencey, there are other energy pathways that we can use, but our body's main preferred source of fuel is carbohydrates. And that doesn't go without saying that our bodies are also very efficient at making energy. So if we don't have enough glycogen stores or carb stores, our body's going to start to pull from other energy sources. So whether that be proteins or fats, those energy pathways specifically aren't as efficient in some cases. So that's why it's really key that we are fueling with carbohydrates. Um, and then also pre-workout, getting some hydration in to, prepare for potential fluid loss during training or during a game. So using something like water or, some electrolytes too can be helpful. I did want to kind of highlight the nutrition facts label where you can find, these carbohydrates. I know sometimes Gatorade gets a little bit of a bad rep, I think, in social media and media in general for having a lot of sugar. But as I just mentioned, that sugar plays a role in, not only giving us energy, but also carbohydrates carry water. So when we are getting more carbs in and getting those electrolytes in from a Gatorade, for example, we're also helping our bodies to get hydrated better. So that's why, Gatorade is a useful tool, and it's easy. It's already put together for you. So whether it's using something like Gatorade or just regular water, or even using an electrolyte supplement, something like Element or Drip Drop, as you can see those two packets there, just ones that are pretty common. And those can be really helpful as well. And then, pre-training, we do like from those carb sources, making them easy to digest. So, having something like a fruit smoothie, like a naked juice, or just a piece of fruit, a couple pieces of fruit, a bowl of cereal, or some crackers, or maybe a sandwich if you can handle it from like a gastrointestinal standpoint. Those are all really great options. Again, these are going to vary person to person, but just some basic general guidelines. These are kind of what you can stick to. So if we want to take a look at fueling during our workouts, or if we're in a game, maybe you have a double header that day, something to consider is game time fueling. So we really, at this point, want to avoid your energy levels dropping too low during a game. So, considering adding a snack halfway through, maybe like third or fourth inning, to maintain your energy levels and also stay hydrated. So again, the focus here is going to be carbs and hydration. So another reason why Gatorade has sugar in it, so that we can, continue to get those electrolytes, get hydrated, and also provide our body with a little bit more energy to do the work that we're asking it to do. One thing that's important to know is that if you are feeling hungry or you're feeling really thirsty, you're kind of already behind. It's not the worst thing in the world by any means. I don't want to scare anyone. But we want to kind of stay ahead of that. So trying to avoid, getting to that point where it's like, oh my gosh, I'm feeling really hungry or I'm feeling really thirsty. We want to try to avoid getting to that point. Obviously, if you get there and you notice that, like, definitely take action. But by incorporating some snacks and some other fueling strategies during the game, that can kind of help to avoid getting into that situation. If you're in a situation where, maybe you have a double header, using that time in between games to have like a refuel snack. So maybe wanting to consume something a little bit heavier, more of like a recovery based snack, which we'll talk about in the next slide. But making something a little bit bigger, just your snack a little bit bigger, just to kind of, again, refuel that tank, and get you ready for the next game that you're going to have. So if we take a look at post-workout fueling, the things we kind of want to focus on, mainly protein and carbs, but also hydration and antioxidants as well. So when we're looking at protein, ideally, we want to get about 20 grams of protein post-workout. That protein is going to help to provide the building blocks for your muscles to help repair them and build them up as well. So trying to get, around 20 grams of protein. So some of these protein bars, or if you can have like something like a Core Power or a Fairlife, those are really good options as well. I really like chocolate milk as an option, especially the chocolate Fairlife, because it is shelf stable, so you don't have to keep it cold. Which might be a little unsettling for some people, but that's a good option to just have in the bag ready to go. Because I understand, sometimes coolers aren't always available, or, it's just not the right time. So those are two really good options. Chocolate specifically, because it does have a little bit more sugar in it. Again, getting those carbs in, we want to focus on protein and carbs post-workout. So again, carbs, replacing that fuel for your muscles to keep them going. So after we work out, we've just depleted our glycogen stores and we need to refill them. So you can think of it as like filling up a gas tank, similar thing. We want to aim for about 50 grams of carbs post-workout. And I know I'm kind of throwing out some numbers here. They might seem a little random, but I'll give you some examples of what these like post-workout snacks can look like, to give you a better picture of what you should be aiming for. And then bonus, obviously we want to hydrate after training or after a game. And then an extra bonus would be getting in some type of antioxidants. So whether that's using something like a tart cherry juice, or getting some fruit in, that kind of doubles as your carbs and your antioxidants. You get a win-win there. Again, we want to try and replace those fluids that we lost, as well as the electrolytes. If you don't have any type of electrolytes with you, you're like, all I have is water, that's fine. When you go to eat your next meal, just try and add maybe like a little bit of salt to your meal and salt your food, because that's essentially the same thing. You're probably going to go and eat a meal after, working out. So if you can add a little bit of salt to whatever you're eating, that kind of will do the trick as well. It doesn't always have to be, so specific and complex of like, I have to have all these supplements and things to like stay on top of my nutrition. We can make it really simple, and attainable as well. So something like tart cherry juice is also really good with providing the antioxidants and also helping to manage inflammation. So if you're in season, you're training a lot, or you just have a lot going on, that can really help to, improve your recovery times as well. The specific cherries that are in tart cherry juice are called Montmorency cherries. So those specifically have been studied in their ability to help reduce muscle soreness after training in athletes. And then they also contain small amounts of melatonin. So from a sleep perspective, is really beneficial for recovery. So getting something like this in, even if it's like later at night, if you eat dinner, let's say, and then want to have like a late night snack, having something like a tart cherry juice with, a protein source would be a really good option for a late night snack as well. Again, just to prioritize that recovery. So that's kind of what we want to look at for post-workout fueling. Again, focusing on protein and carbs. Obviously, we want to get some hydration in. And then if we can, get the bonus, the antioxidants, that's even better. Again, it doesn't have to be anything super crazy. It can be really simple as a protein bar, maybe a piece of fruit, and some water or a Gatorade. I know some individuals that I've worked with struggle with eating directly after training or after a game, especially if it's hot out. So one thing that can be helpful for that is drinking cold liquids. So the goal there is to kind of bring down your internal body temperature as fast as possible. So the easiest way to do that is to drink cold liquids. One thing that can be done is drinking them beforehand too. So drinking like cold water before going into training or a game, and then afterwards as well, to kind of help bring that core body temperature down, so that you can eat something after. I know it takes a little bit of time sometimes to kind of implement these strategies. So if you're not used to eating something after or even before, starting small is really helpful as well. It doesn't have to be, you have to do all the things all at once. We can take like little bits and pieces here and there and implement them slowly. And that's always a better way to start too when we're looking at setting goals and doing those types of things. So speaking of hydration, kind of some easy guidelines to follow for before, during, and after training or games. Before training, aiming for around like 16 to 24 ounces, 1 to 2 hours before like practices or games. Again, this will vary person to person. Obviously, some people sweat more than others, which is totally fine. So this is just a basic general guideline. If you have more questions, feel free to reach out. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. During training, we want to try to get like 6 to 12 ounces every like 10 to 20 minutes if possible. Obviously, I know if you're in the middle of a game, it's probably not going to be that frequent, but still trying to make it a priority, especially in warmer weather. So that's about 6 to 10 big gulps of either water or sports drink. And then afterwards, again, just trying to stay as hydrated as possible, getting something in. One thing you can kind of play around with, this would probably be, easier to do on a training day, is weighing yourself before and after training to see how much weight you lost in your sweat. That way you can then rehydrate appropriately. So using like 16 to 24 ounces per pound of body weight lost is kind of a good way, like rule of thumb to follow. You can also just start with 16 to 24 ounces. I understand like not everybody maybe doesn't have access to a scale, or it's just not the most realistic thing for you, and that's totally fine. So just starting with that, maybe like 16 to 24 ounces per hour, or like within the first hour would be good. The other thing is when we start to see an athlete specifically like a 2% decrease in hydration, that's when we start to see things like reduced, oh my gosh, I just lost my train of thought, sorry. Reduced reaction times and just the overall decreased performance, especially from like a cognitive level. So that's why staying hydrated is so important, especially like before, during, and after, because it can help to really mitigate that as well. So I know I've talked about electrolytes and I've talked about drinking water. So it's kind of like, okay, which one should I start with? So again, a good rule of thumb to follow is if you're moving less than 60 minutes, water is probably sufficient, unless you know you're a really salty sweater. So if after you're done with practice, if your clothes dry and you notice there's like salt on them, that could be an indication that you are a saltier sweater. So that is kind of one way to track that. But again, moving less than 60 minutes, water is probably sufficient. If you're moving more than 60 minutes, having a longer training session or game, definitely want to consider a sports drink to replace electrolytes and carbohydrates. Again, help with that hydration and refueling your muscles. And remember, carbs carry water. So that's going to help to, get you rehydrated a little bit faster by having that combination of electrolytes and carbohydrates. So then if we take a look at some post-workout snack examples, again, this is just kind of some suggestions here that are following about that, like 20 grams of protein and 50 to 60 grams of carbs post-workout. So something like a yogurt parfait, using Greek yogurt would be super easy. If it's accessible, a smoothie, or maybe making a smoothie ahead of time. Using chocolate milk and peanut butter and Greek yogurt is really delicious. It tastes like a Reese's peanut butter cup. Using something, it can be really as simple as just having some chocolate milk, or having like a chocolate Fairlife again. Using an Uncrustable or like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich with chocolate milk or chocolate Fairlife, doing something like a Cliff Bar and a Fairlife, and then doing even like hard-boiled eggs with like a chewy bar or some type of granola bar and chocolate milk. Again, getting that protein and the carbs in as well. The reason I say Fairlife too is, again, it's shelf stable, so it doesn't always have to stay cold. Once it's opened, it has to be refrigerated, but as long as it's unopened and the bottle's still sealed, it doesn't have to be refrigerated. Same thing with Core Power, and also they are lactose free. So if you have any like GI discomfort or if you are lactose intolerant, this is a good option too. That'll still get you quite a bit of protein, and be an easy source of refuel for you. So if we want to take a look at training plates, how training plates should be built, what your plate should look like when we're looking at food. Typically, and most athletes that I've seen and worked with, they ideally want to stick around like a moderate to heavy plate, just because of training demands purely, especially those individuals that are competing at the high school level, because you're still at an age of development, still growing, still developing as a human. And so on top of that, you're also training at a higher level. So we want to make sure that we're giving your body enough energy and enough fuel to not only grow and develop, but also support you in your sport. So focusing on having more of a moderate to heavy plate, is going to be really, conducive to your training and your overall health. So moderate plate, looking at that, kind of like a third carbs, a third veggies, and a third protein. Again, training intensity is going to be more like light or to moderate, or maybe you're only training once that day, which is fine, but still wanting to make sure that you're getting enough fuel in. Also on recovery days, I think a big misconception that I see is that recovery days, you don't have to eat as much because you're not training. But a lot of times that is a day that you can use to really like optimize your nutrition and refuel your body, especially if you're struggling to eat enough throughout the week on the days that you are training. Using that recovery day to really, like, again, top off those glycogen stores and give your body that energy that it needs to actually recover is going to be really beneficial. So I see that a lot. Athletes saying like, oh, it's a recovery day, I'm not training today, or I'm doing something super light, like I don't really need to eat a lot because of that. But you actually do need to eat still, and probably just as much, to give your body the fuel that it needs to recover. So that's super important. Definitely something that I've seen before, that is easy to fix, and easy to implement as well. So a heavy training plate, if you're training 2 times a day, or if it's game day, or even the night before game day, that would be an ideal time to use this. Again, making probably like half of your plate carbs, a quarter veggies, and then a quarter protein. Again, the emphasis is on the carbs because that is our body's main source of fuel. Think about all the muscle that you have in your body. That all needs carbs to give you energy. So we really want to be focusing on that, and giving your body enough energy to do the work that you're asking it to do. You wouldn't show up to a street race, if you're driving with an empty gas tank, because you're not going to get very far. So it's kind of the same thing when we talk about carbs and fueling, because that's really what is giving you your energy. So obviously we're not just eating carbs, protein, and veggies, right? Like there's more things that we can put on our plate, and more things that we want to put on our plate, because it doesn't have to be boring. So using things like juice, seltzer, tea or milk for hydration, doing like 100% fruit juice is a really good way to add in some extra carbs. So if you are trying to do, this heavy training plate and you're like, man, I cannot eat that many carbs. It sometimes is a lot for people. So utilizing liquids, utilizing something like 100% fruit juice that's going to still have, carbs, but then also some vitamins, minerals, antioxidants in it as well, is a really good option to add to your plate. Using fresh canned or frozen fruit, or even frozen veggies. Those are all really good options if you are pressed for time. As athletes, and if you're in school right now, I know you probably don't have a lot of time. So if you are preparing your own meals, frozen or canned items can be really helpful and like a really useful tool, to achieve your fueling goals. And a lot of times, actually, fun fact, so a lot of times frozen fruit and veggies are actually just as nutrient dense, if not more nutrient dense. So when I say nutrient dense, that just means they have a lot of vitamins, minerals, antioxidants in them. So they're just as, if not more, nutrient dense than fresh produce. Because depending on if that produce is in season, depending on where it's coming from, that transit time that it has to take from wherever it was harvested to the grocery store to your fridge, within that time, it can lose some of its nutrient density. So trying to whereas frozen fruit and veggies are oftentimes picked and harvested at their peak freshness and then frozen. So sometimes they can have more nutrients. Again, is that something that I want you to stress out about and be like, oh no, I have to have a switch to all frozen thing? No, it's not that serious, but I think frozen foods get a lot of bad rep. So I just wanted to share that little bit of information because they can be a really useful tool, especially when you're pressed for time. Even frozen proteins that you can just heat and go, can be really beneficial in adding to your fueling plan. So adding things also like salsa or dressings, cheese, healthy fats like avocado, olive oil, walnuts, peanuts, those kinds of things. We do need healthy fats to help us process certain vitamins. So those are, and different hormones need different levels of fat. So those are really beneficial at getting those in. And then also spicing up your meals with herbs and other spices too. So I just wanted to provide some examples. These are actually training plates from my time at Northwestern. These different plates are from different athletes and different sports. So again, it's different person to person. And I think that's something to remember too, is that whatever your teammate might be doing might not be the best option for you as well. So that's why it's important to, find out like, what are my specific needs, because what one person might be doing might not work for me. But taking a look at these, seeing some of the heavy training days, the amount of carbs. If we take a look at that first picture, they have a whole sandwich with a full bun, 2 grilled cheeses, some rice, some veggies, and then that, I think it was fish. I also think that this was from a football player, so it makes sense that their plate's going to be a little bit bigger. And then looking at the moderate training day, you can see they have the protein on their plate, the chicken, a good amount of rice and some broccoli, and then another heavy training day. So looking at their potatoes on that bottom part of their plate, some grilled cheese. It looks like they have some fish on there, a little bit of salad, some asparagus, and then they have a smoothie. Again, another good example of using liquids for an extra carb source. So fruit smoothie and a banana as well. So just kind of some examples, some things to take a look at and see like what this actually looks like on a plate. And again, everyone's going to be a little bit different, but just kind of some guidelines to follow. So I did want to talk a little bit about supplements, because I get a lot of questions about supplements. So I didn't feel like I wouldn't be doing my job if I wasn't talking about this. So a couple of things to look out for when we're talking about supplements, when you're considering using a new supplement. Definitely want to take a look at that label and proprietary blends. So a lot of times in things like pre-workouts or athletic greens or any other type of like blend of product, it's not just like vitamin D. Those are a lot of times going to have a proprietary blend. The only issue with that is that a lot of times it's not, the supplement company doesn't disclose how much of each item is in that proprietary blend. So you don't really know the amount of what you're taking and if it's the right amount for you. So that's one thing to kind of be cautious of. Another thing is the product third-party tested? I'll talk a little bit more about this on the next slide, but that's something to look out for. Another thing is the product being promoted? Is it, your favorite influencer or athlete that you're following on social media? Like, I took this supplement and it changed my life and I'm a super athlete now, are they getting paid for it? That's kind of the world we live in. So it's important to take a look at that and see like, okay, are they getting paid for this, or is this something that's legitimate? And I'll give you some tips too on how to assess whether or not like a supplement might be for you. And then also, what are the nutrition and health claims? What is the supplement claiming that it does, and does it actually do that? So it's important to, kind of weigh all these things when you're starting a new supplement. And obviously you want to make sure that you're checking with, your doctor or your healthcare provider, or registered dietitian or someone who is trained on how to, evaluate these supplements and if they're the right fit for you. Because sometimes they claim to, give you all this energy. And I think one good example is like Celsius, for example. They have, burns fat and gives you energy, but like the only thing that's really giving you the energy is the caffeine, and that's not even really like giving you that energy. It's just, stimulating your nervous system. Food gives you energy. So it's important to kind of think about all these things before, you just jump on and start a new supplement. I think the biggest thing, as I mentioned, third-party testing. So the FDA actually does not regulate supplements. So that means that supplement companies can kind of put whatever they want in supplements and they don't have to tell you, which is how some athletes end up with, suspensions or a positive drug test because they're taking something that, hasn't been tested and they don't actually know what's in it, and then they end up with that result. So it's important to know that. So there are third-party testing companies that will, ensure that what's in the bottle matches what's on the label. The only thing is that these supplement companies have to pay to have their products third-party tested. So a lot of companies don't want to do that because that's not important to them. So luckily for athletes, there are two that I like to look for. So these two labels on the right-hand side, Informed Sport and NSF Certified for Sport. Those two are really good options. You can go to their website, you can type in, actually, like, if you want to search for a protein powder, for example, you can type in protein powder and they'll give you a list of brands that they have checked their product and they have verified, like, this is safe for athletes. One thing that's also important to note is that just because a product has been third-party tested, it doesn't mean that, okay, you're in the clear, it's 100% safe. Like, there's always going to be some risk with supplements, especially if you are in the realm of like where you're being tested, drug tested if you're at the collegiate level, or professional, like those things are going to happen. So it's important to kind of keep that in mind as well. But as long as we can mitigate the risk as much as possible, that's always beneficial. And then these are just three brands that I like personally: Clean Athlete, Design for Sport, and Thorne. Thorne, I know, has like specific NSF certified for sport products. So just again, making sure that you're checking on the website, checking to see, do they have these like third-party testing certifications. Another one that I don't have on here is USP, that you'll find on a lot of nature made products. So you'll find those at like Walgreens or CVS or Target. It's a little green and gold round like circle label, and it says USP. Those ones are relatively safe. Again, they're not tested specifically for athletes. So just again, remembering that there is going to be some risk associated with that. But this, I think, is really something that's important. And also, even for non-athlete individuals, I still recommend third-party tested supplements, because I feel like, what's the point in paying to take a supplement if you don't even know that like you're getting what you're paying for? So that's my spiel on the third-party testing. Just, it's better to be safe than sorry. So doing a quick supplement review, I always get asked this: what supplements do you recommend? Some potentially beneficial ones, or ones that I typically like to recommend because they've been studied and we know that there's actually a benefit to them. A multivitamin, I like to think of this as like your insurance policy for your vitamins and minerals. So nobody has a perfect diet, and that's fine. We're all human. We're not eating sometimes all of our veggies and all of our fruits, and that's okay. So the multivitamin kind of helps with it, filling any nutrient gaps that we might be experiencing through our normal eating patterns. In addition, as athletes, nutrient wise, like, you'll need a little bit more just because you're putting your body through more stress. So having, an extra dose of vitamins and minerals can really help with that. Also, omega-3 supplement. We don't typically get enough of this in our diet. A lot of times we can find it in fatty fish like salmon or walnuts, or different like flax seeds. But the only thing with that is that sometimes we don't know like the exact amount. So for salmon, for example, a lot of times the amount of omega-3s or the amount of omega-3s varies depending on the diet of the fish, whether it was wild caught or farm raised. So while I'm not saying like don't eat those foods, obviously still eat them because there are like benefits to eating them. And I want us to focus on a food first approach, but knowing that as athletes, those nutrient demands are going to be a little bit higher than a general population. So that's why I feel like sometimes these supplements can be beneficial. Omega-3s also help to support brain health. Our brain is primarily made up of fat, muscle growth as well. There's some interesting research that shows that, in a higher ratio of omega-3s in our cell membrane, which I'll get to in a second, can help with increased muscle growth, and then also helping to manage inflammation. There's a lot of research around that. We know for sure. When we're talking about, just to take you back to biology class really quick, when we're talking about, I mentioned the omega-3 ratio. So in all of our cell membranes, all the cells in our body, we have the cell membrane, and it's made up of these, phospholipids, these fat cells, right? Those are primarily comprised of omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids. So we get both omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids from our diet, but typically the way our diet and the way our food is, we get more omega-6s. So that's why it's important to kind of even that out with omega-3s to have a more even ratio. And the reason I say that is because they've found that a more even ratio between omega-3 and omega-6s in, our cells, can lead to a better cell structure, which then leads to a better cell function. And that's just important for, all of the reasons that I mentioned, supporting our brain health, muscle growth, managing inflammation. We have cells all over our body, so we want to try to do what we can to support those. And then, so we'll leave biology class for now. So then looking at vitamin D, a lot of research there supporting immune health, bone health, and some emerging research showing that it can help to support our gut health as well. Again, as athletes, needs are a little bit higher for all of these things. So that's why, it could be potentially beneficial to supplement with them. One thing I will note is that a lot of these research studies have been done in individuals 18 years and older. So it is important to kind of keep that in mind. If you are under 18, making sure that, you're checking with your doctor, checking with your parents, making sure that, this is the right choice for you. Just because, most of those research studies have been done, but these are generally, I think, on the safer side. And obviously we want to focus on getting food first, and then adding in supplements. So yeah. So just to kind of wrap up here, some key takeaways. Again, we really want to avoid underfueling. So maintaining energy levels by, making sure that we're fueling throughout the day, trying to get at least 3 meals and 2 snacks. So getting a breakfast in, getting lunch, getting dinner, and, getting that pre and post training snack in to really help optimize your performance. Remember, when we're not eating enough and we're like consistently under fueling, that can set us up for, delayed recovery, potential injury, and just overall decreased performance. And I don't think anybody wants any of those things. So that's why it's so important to make sure that we are eating enough. And then of course, prioritizing hydration, making sure that, you're maintaining those hydration levels on and off the field, and incorporating electrolytes when necessary. And then of course, lastly, using supplements safely. So, consulting a professional, whether it's your doctor or registered dietitian. If you have any questions and you want to reach out to me, please feel free to do so. And then just doing your research when it comes to supplements, not falling for like those influencers that you see. It's like, oh, I took this and my hair is like so long now. So trying to keep that stuff in mind and really find out like what's the purpose of this. So that's kind of all I have to share. You can scan this QR code and connect with me if you have any questions, or if you'd like this presentation. I know it's being recorded, so we'll be able to share that way as well. But I'm not sure if anybody has any questions. But thank you all for being here. I know it's beautiful outside, so hopefully you all get to go spend some time outdoors the rest of today. But yeah, otherwise, thank you all for joining.
Thank you, Courtney. Does anyone have any questions that they want to ask Courtney before she jumps off? I can see everyone here. Let's see here. I have a question, I think, just from my experience. I think maybe you and I have already talked about this, but could you reference a little bit of like You didn't talk sort of specifically about like calories. Obviously, I think those plates at the end, my guess is for a lot of our athletes seemed really large. One of the things I think we run into a lot is that, I work with athletes like during the summer and we're at games, and a lot of times they almost go like off of like an adult healthy diet that's like
Mhm.
a salad, that seems maybe not enough. Are there calorie ranges you would recommend for people, or how do they know the quantity that they should be eating at these times outside of the like grams of proteins and things like that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I so in terms of like calorie ranges, it's kind of hard because it kind of depends on the person and their age and where they're at. I think generally, like most athletes, especially like at the high school level, need at a minimum like 2,300 or more. Obviously, there's very specific like calculations I could do to give you like exact numbers. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think in that case, the most important thing to follow and remember is that, at the end of the day, like you're an athlete, you're not general population. So your nutrient needs and your energy requirements are a lot different than, you know, having a salad and just general population. Because your energy demands are so much different. Um, so yeah, I think like in terms of energy, like specific calorie recommendations, it's kind of hard for me to provide that because it kind of depends on, you know, the person and their size and how what their training levels are like and all that kind of stuff. But I think the biggest things I see too is like not eating enough carbs. So I think that's one place I would start too, is like assessing what the carb intake is, and being more aware physically of how your energy levels are. So like that can be a really good place to start. Obviously, I know like the plates that I shared, yeah, some of them were really large and that's fine, because it met like where that person was at. But taking a note, like a mental note, like when the individuals are eating, like, okay, how am I feeling? Am I feeling full? Am I still feeling hungry? And kind of noticing some of those like hunger and satiety cues at meal times, but then also during training, like, oh, I didn't eat a snack, or maybe I did eat a snack before training, but now I'm feeling hungry again, like 30 minutes in. So maybe I did need to eat a little bit more. And obviously I'm happy to like partner with anyone if they have any questions about getting more specific on those things, because I definitely can help with that. But um, yeah, I think in terms of like providing general recommendations, it gets a little tough.
Great. I see another question here that in the chat, and this was something I was thinking too, so I'm glad someone asked it. So, it's a question for food at softball tournaments when they're playing all day. Do you have good examples of lunches, when you're eating out of a cooler? And should a pitcher have a post-workout snack after finish pitching a game? So, just for reference, Courtney, like, tournaments you could be at the field for 12 hours. So obviously, there's some challenges that I think we all run into with packing. So maybe just some ideas around that when you're sort of stuck eating maybe at a cooler that you have to have in your car or something like that, is the first one. And then should pitchers specifically post game snack when they pitch? That was the second one.
Yeah, totally. That's a really great question. And so first answer, examples of lunches out of a cooler. I think there in that aspect, like sandwiches would be a really good option. Things that are shelf stable. So like shelf stable carb sources, whether it's, something like maybe some goldfish or fruit snacks, like those are really easy to digest, especially if you are having a tournament, you're playing all day. You don't want to be eating something that's really heavy and going to sit in your stomach, especially if you're not used to fueling in between. So trying to, kind of avoid any like GI distress that you might encounter by eating more. So yeah, sandwiches. Um, what else did I say? Oh, the like goldfish, fruit snacks, um, even like fruit is really easy too. And then also leaning on liquid sources as well, as I mentioned, like doing things like Gatorade. And it might take some time to kind of like fine tune to figure out like what works for you specifically. Naked smoothies are really a great option as well. I know some people kind of get a little nervous because they have more sugar in them, but again, it's like a matter of refilling those carb stores. Trail mix is a really great option as well. Popcorn, pretzels, anything that's like going to be salty too to help you get rehydrated. So those are kind of some of the first things that come to mind. For those situations. Um, One thing I like to do too is uh like a deli meat roll up. So you can do like I'll take some like turkey lunch meat with like some mustard, maybe a little bit of avocado on there, some cheese, and then pair that with some crackers, like kind of like a lunchable essentially. So you can do something like that as well. That's easy to, prep and have in a cooler ready to go for you. So yeah. And then the second answer, should you have a post-workout snack after you finish pitching a game? Yeah, I still would recommend having that. Just because, you are still putting in work as a pitcher. So definitely want to get that like recovery in. Because it's not like you're just, standing out there, you're still putting in work and you need to use power and produce that power and force to, get it done. So definitely would still have a post-workout snack after you finish. And then most likely like you're probably going to be eating after, so that's fine, but still definitely want to prioritize that. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, if no one else has any questions, thank you so much, Courtney. I think this was super helpful. And then obviously, you put your info there and we can share your info as well if people have follow-up questions for you or want to reach out for more specific guidance.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. Bye. Thank you.
Bye.